What was the culmination, the reason, the moment when you decided it was not the career path for you anymore to be a corporate guy?
Well, quite honestly, I crashed. I was on the corporate jet flying all over the world, and I looked around and said, what a nest of vipers this is. And there's an old adage, if you look around the table and you don't see the sucker, you're the sucker. I said, I just don't fit here. And 30 years of wearing the corporate mask really wore on me. And my 50th birthday, I celebrated, on top of the world. Great job, family, cars, houses, everything. Rode my motorcycle across the US in celebration on top of the world. At the end of that year, I ended up in rehab. And the coping mechanisms I had to fit into that corporate world to wear the corporate mask ultimately blew my life apart. And since that time, it's been an incredible rebuilding. It's something that ultimately I'm very thankful for in my path now.
When you say vipers, can you explain that? What do you mean? And you could even parlay that into corporate mask. I feel like there's some interrelatedness between these terms. Can you kind of unpack that a little bit, tease that out?
And this was a Fortune 100 company, very successful company. The executives on that jet were extremely sharp and extremely ambitious. And the higher you get up to the corporate ladder, the less friendship and trust are present. Everyone's got an edge, everyone's got an angle, and that really wasn't me. And the mask meant not being authentic, not saying what I truly felt, parsing my words so carefully. It was like, for me, at least my corporate experience, it was like kabuki theater. And I wasn't that good of a kabuki actor. Good enough, but not good enough in the end.
That's so interesting. Competition over collaboration, the higher you go. And even to get to that point, I'll use a quick similar example. And this is on my way up. Something I thought was broken or wrong with me. When I was a claims manager for this insurance company, we had territories. And depending on where the claim happened, that territory, that area took the claim. So I managed a region and then somebody else managed a neighboring region. There was always these border wars, we would call it, because all of our metrics, all of our promotions were based on how fast do we resolve claims. There were specific metrics around it. So when something came in on the border, like I would just be like, whatever, we'll take it. I don't care. But for the neighboring group, it was like, oh, it's going to take us. It's far out there. We have to respond within a certain amount of time. It's a 2-hour drive. So for them, it was like, get rid of it. And they would be really aggressively pushing it on my team. And I would just tell my team, just take it. And my team would be like, why are we taking it? We're getting it. Who cares, man? We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. I don't need to get into this back and forth over a border and a stat or whatever. And I still succeeded despite it, but it was not the mindset of those around me. The mindset of those around me was like, dump it, get it on somebody else. Don't impact me and my numbers and my department and my results. Sounds like that's what you were experiencing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just these agendas. And, early in your career, when you're a young professional, the collaboration and the teamwork are more genuine. But as you
Yeah.
ascend that ladder, it just gets, to me, at least in my experience, it got sharper and sharper, the competition.
Yep. I completely agree. I have dogs barking. Apologies. You leave the job at 50, you end up in rehab. So it sounds like you're 57 now, correct? 7 years?
58, 8 years.
58. 8 years since you've left the job. You've been in rehab at least. That's one thing.
Yeah.
Has there been more in dismantling this identity that you had up to the year 50? Have there been other challenges, or was rehab the bottom for you in the last 8 years?
I'd say that was the most significant and transformative bottom, because what it did was make me look at my hypothesis for happiness and determine that it was totally corrupt. And I'm not alone. And rehab catalyzed this incredible journey of spiritual growth and research and discovery that's put me on my path now. And I never would have gotten to that path, which has really leveled up my happiness, allows me to really help others to achieve sustained happiness. I never would have gotten there without that bottom. And bottoms are gifts if we approach them the right way. And what I found is there's two primary ingredients. First of all, we don't like bottoms. No one wants to experience suffering. But Richard Rohr, the Franciscan priest and author, said it's a spiritual axiom: the way down is the way up. When we really hit bottom, then that pain threshold puts us in a position for amazing growth. If I found two aspects are in play. Number one, you do the work. You look at yourself clearly, you understand what happened, you throw yourself into whatever development you need. Number two, you get support. We can make a lot of progress individually, but when we work with others, with close friends, with a coach, with a therapist, it just takes our development to a different level. So I've really learned to appreciate my bottoms. The Japanese call them kensho moments. Some people may be familiar with something called a satori moment, which the clouds part and there's a sudden epiphany and you level up. I don't get a lot of satori moments. I get kensho moments, difficulties that you surmount that level you up.
Oh, I love that. I love that. What aspects of rehab, what elements of rehab show up the most for you in your pursuit of happiness?
I would say looking at my happiness hypothesis, which is something that I never looked at before. There's something called mimetic desire. Have you ever heard of mimetic desire?
No, no.
It's the same root word as meme. It means that our desires are largely implanted in us from looking at other people. Why is it we want a BMW?
Hmm.
Why is it we want a shore house? Why is it we want all those things? Because we've been influenced that that's what we need to be happy. And what I found when I did my research, I went and did a super deep dive, took me years, into the 7 great wisdom traditions: Buddhism, Confucianism, Islam, Christianity, etc. And I found they were all saying the same things. And it was so contrary to the mimetic desires that were implanted in me, the typical sort of programming for happiness that you got, I got, we all got. And what fired me up is here, we cracked the code on this as humans in 500 BC.
Hmm.
And these secrets have been lost. They're hiding in plain sight. So, yeah, recovery catalyzed this incredible, rich rediscovery of who I am and what happiness looks like.
Is happiness the ultimate outcome, or is the pursuit of happiness where fulfillment comes from? Like, in other words, do you achieve happiness or do you pursue happiness?
Really, I think the best way to say it is that you be happiness, that it is happiness in the moment. Think about the best times in your life, the most amazing moments. We only realize them in retrospect for the most part. We say, "Oh my gosh, that was incredible." And our opportunity is when we experience a really happy moment to stop and really reflect and say, this is as good as it gets. It is absolutely the journey. It is absolutely the present, the now. In my data, and I've interviewed over 250 people based on an instrument around these ancient themes of happiness, living in the now is the number one most highly correlated attribute of being happy,
Hmm.
ridiculously correlated. So being able to sit in the now and collect yourself and say, what is it I have to be happy about? What is it in my life? There's something called the hedonic treadmill. Have you ever
Yeah,
run across that? Yeah.
I have. Yeah,
Hedonic treadmill says, I will be happy when.
yeah.
And it's an absolutely faulty hypothesis because we get there and then we say, okay, well, I don't feel as happy as I'd like to be. So now I'll be happy then. And it never stops. So being in the now, saying that happiness is in the moment is really important. But it's hard. It's really hard to live in the now.
Yeah.
We're programmed to live in the future. We're programmed to ruminate on the past. It just seems to be a legacy of our survival wiring. It takes real discipline to stay in the now. But I do have one hack. It's from the Zen wisdom tradition. It's to ask yourself, what more in this moment do I need?
Mm.
So I'm going to ask myself that. I'm sitting here with Jamie Gruber, a friend who I love working with. We're talking about amazing stuff. We're reaching people on one of the most important topics you can possibly imagine.
Yeah.
We're blasting out to all sorts of people to help them. This is being. This is happy right now. What more in this moment do I need? Nothing, Jamie.
That's a great point. Because I'll be honest, I'm thinking through, like, I love being here, and as I do these interviews, I tend to get more and more present as the interview goes on, because you're creating more and more of the bites of what I believe I'm great at, which is being curious, right? Like, you're giving me more, like, I'm writing things down now. I got a bunch of stuff down here. You just gave me one of them, which was a hack I was going to ask about. But at the same time, as I start this, it's like, okay, got this interview, and then, right, for the rest of the day. So to your point, what more do I need in this moment? Nothing. Nothing. This is great. Like, because I'm doing what I love. I'm having a conversation with somebody that I respect and getting again, writing things down because you're stoking curiosity, which is when I feel absolutely alive. So on that point, I think it segues into this question. How do I know when my pursuit of happiness is purely from influence versus being authentic?
That's a great question. How do you know when you're in the program,
Yeah.
when you're in the matrix?
I have a deeper question after that, but yeah, let's start with this.
That's a terrific question. You know, I think we're so biased inherently that it's almost impossible to tell. But there's a way out of that. What I found, and this is another very highly correlated aspect of happiness, is friendship and relationships. Really close, transparent, vulnerable relationships. When I mentioned before, the aspect of getting out of a bottom is getting support. Part of that is leaning into particularly your platonic friends, and telling them exactly what's going on, being radically transparent in who you are. Can you do that with everyone in life? No, not everyone is safe enough. But if you have those friends with shared values that you can really go deep, the first step is
The key to life, it isn't money, it's happiness. And when you measure how happy you are, you actually become even more happy. Our friends at Gobundance, the Tribe of Millionaires, use a very specific tool to measure their happiness. It's called the Life Happiness Index, and you can have it too. Go over to gobundance.com/LHI and take your Life Happiness Index assessment. You'll rate yourself in multiple categories on exactly how happy you are and get a custom output for you specifically that you can use in developing whatever goals you have for your life. Gobundance is the tribe of healthy, wealthy, generous people who choose to live epic lives. And the tool Gobundance members use at the base of all of that is the Life Happiness Index. Get out there and grab life big.
give completely away where you are, what you're feared up about, what everything going on in your life. And I find that calibration coming back to me is so critically important because I can't see it myself. There's an old adage, you can't see the label from inside the bottle. I'm inside the bottle. So, one of the things that makes me happiest that I can control, and by the way, this goes to a core Stoic principle about control. Epictetus, one of my favorites, he was a Roman philosopher who found happiness in slavery, which is no mean feat. And his primary theme was control. I can only control my actions and my reactions. I can't control anything else. I can't control your actions. I can't control a whole host of things, but I can control my actions. So I can control the action to trust, to give away what's going on. And I can benefit from the reflections coming back, particularly around growth. I find that when I am growing into something, then it lights me up. So, how is it I know I'm happier? Because my friends are telling me, Mike, you're growing, you're changing, you're looking at life differently. That's an essential calibration for me.
You know what's interesting about what you're saying, and then I'll get into the deeper question I referenced, but let's take this to GoBundance. We're both members of GoBundance as an example, or as the example. So there's whatever people that talk to people within GoBundance that talk to prospects. Somebody applies, they're like, this GoBundance thing is interesting. Let me check it out. I qualify. I'm going to put my application in, and somebody talks to them. And something I contribute to the community is when enrollment is about to close out, I jump on a group call with whatever it is, 12, 15, 20 guys, and just sort of answer questions as a member. As a 5-year member, this is what the experience is like. This has been my experience, this, that, or the other. And what I find interesting is when I look at these men on screen, like they're questioning and wondering, like almost like convince me to spend the money. Almost like, please convince me to spend the money in some ways on this community. And I say to them, like, listen, you guys you don't need my you saw this GoBundance thing. You took time to go onto the website. You filled out the application. You submitted the application. People abandon at all these different points, right? Then you took the time to get on a call with somebody. And then that somebody said, hey, you could join this group call. You accepted that invite. And then you showed up. And now you're participating. That's like a lot of different points at which you didn't need to do. So you're obviously craving something. But to your point about happiness coming from friendship, it almost feels like when somebody's at the decision point of in this world, the world we're in, these mastermind groups as they've popped up, Gobundance and others, and there's an investment of money. There's the like almost like the soul or the desire for fellowship pulling you. And then there's this sort of like pragmatic, practical, what would my friends say side of you saying, you're spending money on what? Like that's not the right investment. Or a Robert Kiyosaki book didn't say this is what you invest in, right? Like there's sort of this duality, like I want this. And if it were just a decision naturally, I want fellowship. And in this world, this era that we're in, the type of fellowship that especially high achievers crave typically comes in a country club, in a mastermind, in something where they have to put some money up to join it. But the other side of you is maybe the fear of judgment or the kind of the keeping up with the Joneses side of somebody might be like, I don't know, somebody's going to look at me really weird if I drop 12, 20 grand, whatever it is on this group. I want to lay that on you. Does that resonate? Is that sort of the duality I'm facing when I get on screen with 12, 15 guys and they're going like, convince me. And I'm like, you don't need, you're here. You did all this stuff that you're craving fellowship. You tell me why you shouldn't, put up your money. Like who's judging you for that? I don't know. Does that resonate at all with you?
It does. Let's go back to normal life. So I'm in my community. I show up with a new Porsche 911. Oh my gosh, you got a new Porsche 911. That's amazing. And mimetic desire. Yeah, everyone is infected by it. They're like, that's really cool. I wish I had one, right? Alternatively, show up and said, I made 3 incredible new friends that are stretching me and growing me. And people, and a certain percentage of people are just going to look at you and say, huh? Right? They just don't know.
Yeah.
But when you look at the data, modern and ancient, Harvard has the longest running study on human happiness. It's a longitudinal study. It's been going on, I think, 70 years. What do you think the number one driver of happiness is? Relationships.
Friendships, right? Yeah. Relationships.
Go to 300 BC. One of my favorites, Epicurus. He said, it's all about friendship. That's the number one driver of happiness. Ancient and modern, they both agree. But an Epicurean friendship was really interesting. It wasn't talking about sports. It wasn't talking about the weather. It was talking about the most important things in life, number one, gentle support, or support, number two, and gentle correction, number three. And part of the challenge for GoBundance for prospective members is they've never perhaps experienced the benefit of really stepping into these vulnerable growth conversations and friendships. Jamie, last Friday I looked at my schedule. I had 7 GoBundance related meetings, friendships, coaching clients, business deals. I'm like, oh my gosh, what a boon. And it's just, how do you transmit the benefit of you're going to grow your life immeasurably by your connection with these people? And the other aspect I touched on, growth repeatedly, that's in my program. I have to keep growing. And, Carol Dweck pointed out there's a growth mindset and there's a fixed mindset in life. Without exception, in my 3 years of GoBundance, meeting hundreds of guys, 100% growth mindset.
Yeah.
There is something about the selection towards, I want more out of life. I want a more expansive life. The guys that do show up, their value alignment is tight. Everyone has a growth mindset. Everyone that I have met is psychologically healthy enough for transparency and vulnerability. What do you compare it to?
Mm-hmm.
I can buy the 911, or I can buy this thing that I've never experienced before.
Right.
That I have to believe you that it exists. And all we can do as alums, as members, is say, hey, there's something really special here. You got to step through that portal.
What you just said was the deeper question I wanted to ask a bit about, and we'll dive into it. As I listen to you, and as people are listening to this, it could be argued that there is sort of a tipping point in human history. You mentioned 300 BC, 500 BC. They kind of figured it out. So the image painted is sort of like, man, from that point forward, everything else that we like layered on above and beyond just fellowship and relationships has fractured happiness from 300 BC through now. For me, I'm wondering though, is that part and parcel of natural human ambition? In other words, is ambition, while it's beautiful and it could be curated and protected within the right social groups or whatever, the greatest gift in the world, but also the greatest detriment to happiness?
All of my work points to 2 pillars. that first, it's number one, it's about serenity, being comfortable in your own skin, being happy in the now, being happy with what you have. But that's not enough. We as humans, we're purpose creatures, we're mission creatures, particularly as men. It is so hardwired into us. So it's serenity plus achievement. The Buddha said, I will not, paraphrasing, I will not be satisfied until I have the utmost achievement. So this is the Buddha who sat under the Bodhi tree, the archetype of serenity, saying, I must achieve. And what did he do? He didn't just go into nirvana and just go on a solo adventure. He went and he kicked ass. He taught for 30 years. He ordained thousands of monks, men and women. He ignited a worldwide movement that still profoundly influences people today. It is both. It is absolutely achievement plus, but how is it we enjoy that achievement? How is it pointed in the right direction? And he used an interesting word, ambition. Ambition and achievement are a little different. When I think of the corporate vipers on the jet,
Yeah.
I think of ambition. I think about me. I think about my triangulation, my goals, my path. When I think about achievement and serenity, a key aspect is service. It's
Oh, dude.
benevolence towards others. The best missions are in service to others. In fact, I saw a quote the other day that I just loved. The work in life is to find your gifts. The next step in life is to bring those gifts to bear in life. And the ultimate purpose is to use those gifts to serve. So being able to find your gifts, your light, to bring them into the world to serve, that's a critical component of happiness, of a fulfilled life.
I love this delineation. I was going to ask you, have we bastardized then the term achievement? And essentially, you just said yes. Whether you meant to or not, in my mind, you said yes. In other words, you're delineating ambition from achievement. I love what you said. Achievement is in through the lens of service. When we talk about men, especially men in our community, right? High achievers. I think that's often associated with the material. Got a
Yeah.
Porsche, got a Lamborghini, got the big house, got the second home, owns X number of units, bought 5 businesses, quit his job, right? Like all of those external markers that are like, they must be happy because look at all they have, versus that's ambition to your point. Wow, they must be happy because look at how they're serving. All of the great things will come back. In fact, when people join Gobundance, I always tell them, like, look, the dumbest thing you can do is come in here with an expectation of getting anything. But it's how we work in consumerist mindsets. I put up money, I get something back. Where's the keys to the car? Where's the deed to the house, right? Money out, something back materially.
Mhm.
And I say, all you did was buy the right to serve other men, high achievers. And when you define achievers as others in service,
Yes.
you know what the parallel to me is? It's the Stoic philosophy of the ego death. And look, you're way deeper on this than me. My opinion is that term, even what's his name? Ryan Holiday, Ego is the Enemy, the book.
Right. Yeah.
I think if you read it on the surface, just like achievement is acquiring, I think ego is the enemy is like bad ego, kill ego, shouldn't have ego, no ego. And I don't believe that's what the Stoics are saying. I think what they're saying is ego is the enemy. And when you allow ego to become, what drives you only, but we have egos, all of us do. And we need to partner with the ego in
Yes.
the drive for achievement, service, right? Like I'll give me as an example. I like being public. I like being out in front. I enjoy it. There's ego in that. There's absolutely ego and significance in that. But I also believe it's the best way for me to serve. I've been blessed. I always say, I wasn't blessed with pigment, height, or good looks, but I was blessed at least with this gift to communicate to others in a way that touches them, that hits, that can land, right? So there is in the ego death for me is like, don't allow the ego to drive me, but listen to the ego's desires and ensure that it gets what it wants. It's also helping others achieving, if you will, the best version of me. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
I think there are really two egos. There's the positive ego and there's the negative ego.
great way of putting it.
We absolutely need the positive ego to have the confidence to do anything in life, to be an entrepreneur or a business person or to serve or to just move forward. We need a positive ego. We need ego strength. Negative ego is ego for the wrong reasons, ego that doesn't serve others, ego that doesn't serve ourselves. And back to your question of how do I know the difference? I have a hard time parsing that myself.
Mm.
What I find is if I just keep giving it away and am radically transparent in my friendships, my friends help me. They help me determine when I'm operating in positive ego or negative ego. Because it's complicated in there, Jamie. It's
Very,
complicated.
very, very. I want to touch on purpose real quick. So you
Mm.
mentioned, we are in pursuit of purpose. Is purpose often associated with achievement instead of with ambition instead of achievement?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's who is it for as I reflect on it in real time. Is it just for me and my negative ego, my fear? Am I proving myself to myself? This is a great thread, by the way. The ego is a strategy. The ego is trying to keep us alive. It's a set of strategies we've developed over time. Entrepreneurs have a higher incidence of trauma than the normal population. 91% in my data versus 70% of the general population. We have more trauma. And punchline, little t traumas count.
Yeah.
Getting bullied at a sensitive age counts. Our ego says, whoa, because when you think about something like that, I'm 9 years old, I'm getting bullied. Go back to how that felt. Your life was ending. You were in absolute strife. It didn't get any worse in your experience. Your ego said, I'm going to fix this. I'm going to find a way to survive this and make sure this never happens again, or I'm going to climb out of it in some way. So, a lot of times, ambition can be I'm going to prove myself to myself. I'm going to prove myself to everyone that shaped me and harmed me. And it starts to be a program that doesn't have a stopping point
Mm.
because I can never get enough. It's back to the hedonic treadmill. I can never prove myself enough and achieve enough if my ego is wounded, if I'm still operating under those paradigms. So, how do you get beyond that? Obviously, deep work, confronting trauma if you have it, therapy, all those sorts of things help. But when in doubt, lean into what you understand to be the positive ego, meaning it's not just about me. It's about, you said earlier, what I give to others, how I serve others. There's an old adage in recovery when your mind is all screwed up, as it particularly is in early recovery, go serve, just start. And you're like, well, wait a minute. How do I serve? My life is an absolute wreck. And the old timers say, go serve, just start. What happens? We start to feel lighter inside.
Mm.
We're not in our own head, we're in someone else's head and we're serving. So, as a destination on positive ego, a supreme hack is towards service. Is this success just for me? Or is this success lifting other people up? Could be my family, could be my company, could be my peers. That's one of the hacks to pointing towards the right sort of achievement.
Well, does it matter if service is tactical versus truly in service authentic? To that point, like if somebody's feeling down, it's like, oh, okay, go serve. Let me go serve. Like, let me check the box on this. Does it
Mm,
matter?
I think it does. The Bhagavad Gita, Hindu wisdom tradition, said selfless service is the supreme goal of life. And I think about that a lot. But I toggle on selfless,
Yeah,
you
me
know,
too.
because if we're serving, but I'm providing value and I'm a coach, then there's little interest there, right? But I'm still serving. But I think it's still the right orientation. Yeah, I apologies. A
No,
couple
I
of
don't believe in selfless. And maybe correct me on this or coach me through this. Because even when, like, look, if it's just as simple as I saw somebody that was in need and I helped them, I didn't advertise it. I didn't say anything to anybody. I didn't put it on social media, nothing. I gave them $10. I brought them a meal. I helped them. They fell over and I helped them stand up. This is the idea of altruism. I don't believe in true altruism. I have gained from that. I feel better about me. I was feeling crappy, and helping this person made me feel not crappy. So I think that selfless is like standard that's impossible in my mind, impossible to achieve. But I do think that there's, like, if you were to see it on a graph, like a large area of gray that's like, yeah, okay, Nothing's completely selfless. Let's just remove that if somebody gets into the weeds of it, right? Like nothing's completely selfless, but there is a tipping point from, hey, when do I get after I gave mindset? Hey, I'm giving. Where is it? Like there's that mindset. I see people do that tactically. I see people in Gobundance like, hey, Jamie, I follow you. And you said, man, join this community, just give. It's been a year. Like, I don't know if I'm going to renew because I'm like, dude, I didn't receive some of the biggest things till year 3, year 4. And why
Mhm.
do I keep coming back? Because I don't know who I haven't met yet. I don't know who I haven't served yet. I don't know what else is going to happen, right? Like who knows? But it took a couple of years of being in service before it returned. So I think there is a tipping point, but I don't believe that selflessness is a real thing. I really don't. Only because, again, I am relieving a sense of guilt or something in me that makes me feel better, even if I'm in service and nobody else sees it. What do you think?
I think that's correct for the vast majority of people. I think there's 1% of humans throughout history have been able to go beyond self.
This is
It's
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The top, self-actualization.
less than 1% of people got there. It's that plus almost all the wisdom traditions got to an exalted state where the self, for a very small percentage of people, the self dissolves and there's ecstatic connection, either with God or with universe. But it's a really small percentage of humans that get there. So it's possible. That's where the Bhagavad Gita is coming from. Selfless service is potential. But for most of us, 99% of us, we're never going to get there. So what does it practically mean? And I want to go back to something you said about ticking the box when it comes to service.
Yeah.
So one of the things an adage I love in GoBundance is around charitable giving is the 3 T's. Are you familiar with those?
I don't think so. No.
I love this framing: time, talent, and treasure.
Oh, I have heard that. Yes.
Those are the
Yeah.
3 legs of the stool. So if it's just treasure, I'm just cutting a check, I'm just giving $10, I'm ticking the box. How does that make us feel inside? Eh, marginal, right?
Sure.
However, same thing. Let's just take time. You're a talented entrepreneur. You go serve in the soup kitchen. It's good. Perhaps a little better than writing a check. But where's the real leverage? When you take your talent times time, when you take your gifts, your zone of genius, and put your time into service, that's where not only do you impact the world in a more profound way, but it feels amazing inside. Because whenever we're in our zone of genius, whenever we're really in flow, that feels awesome. That's self efficacy, that's agency. Bending that towards service, an incredible hack.
I was going to ask a question about extracting value when you're in your zone of genius. Because I know for a lot of people, I struggle with this as well. Giving feels great. Giving your talent, whatever it is. It could be in a podcast. It could be coaching somebody or whatever. How and when do you know, or are there any tips or tactics or hacks that you could speak to that it's okay or the appropriate exchange for you to ask for value in return, be it money, gift, whatever, access, whatever it might be? How and when do you know, or are there ways to know, or are there ways in which you think it's effective to extract value when you are in your zone of genius and providing immense value?
Extracting value. That sounds pretty harsh, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It feels like I'm got like a needle, like
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
like a syringe going in.
I'm,
Like, where's that value? Let me
I'm
suck it out of you.
strip mining this relationship.
It's a terrible way of putting it. Thank you for the reframe. Yeah.
um, when I think about true friendship, my life and the studies I've done, there's a real value constellation. At least for me, the way it's working, number one, authenticity.
Mm.
You're not wearing a mask. I can see you. I see who you are. Number two, growth mindset. You are constantly improving. Number 3 is reciprocity.
Yeah.
That this is not 90-10, right? And I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of 90-10 relationships in my life.
Sure.
I'm giving, I'm giving, I'm giving. I'm in my zone of genius. It feels good to give. But after a while, that reciprocity bites you in the ass. You're like, wait a minute, it's not coming back. And it's okay that there could be long time delays. As you said, there could be years where you invest in something and the ratio is slightly skewed. For me, it's a gut answer in the end to be able to say 2 things. What am I getting back? And how does it make me feel? It could be that you're in a relationship that's not very reciprocal, but it still feels good.
Mm.
You're still giving something away. You're getting enough in return. Even being able to perform in our zone of genius is a form of rewarding ourselves, that we're getting attributes back, we're getting benefits back, even if it's not coming back from that person. By the way, I just want to reinforce something. We're talking about zone of genius, and I think this is always important to note the distinction between the zone of genius and zone of excellence.
Mm.
So anyone listening to this podcast has a lot of things they're excellent at. They're very talented people. And so that means you could be called upon to do lots of different things and you could do them well. That's different than zone of genius. Zone of genius is, what is my light? What is my spark? What makes me truly special? And it's really important to look at that distinction, because you're going to get drawn into all the excellent stuff. Sure, I could do that. Does it light you up? Does it grow you? Is that your superpower? They say work flows to the competent. And that happens when you can be excellent in many things. You have to be very choiceful. I could do that, or where can I continue to lean into my genius? There's a discipline there.
I had Gay Hendricks on a while ago, who wrote The Big Leap. Makes a great distinction between zone of excellence, zone of genius. For me, an indicator, a language indicator of somebody being in their zone of excellence and unaware that they have genius beyond that, is when they're doing something besides their job, their day job, their W-2, if you will. They're investing, they're starting a side hustle or whatever, but the jump out is sort of not the objective. And they say things like, I mean, I like my job. Like, that to me is the worst phrase that somebody can say, because I think of life in chunks. I've got my relationships, my wife, my kids. I've got the things I like to do, like my hobbies and or activities that I do, with my choice, like, whether it's going to a baseball game or whatever it might be. And then I have my work, and then me. Those are the four things I spend the most time doing other than sleeping: with myself, my hobbies, my job, my family, right? In none of those things, other than the job, would I use any other phrasing other than love and still spend time, right? I love myself. I love spending time with myself doing things. I love baseball, collecting cards, coins, stamps, travel, whatever it is your hobby is. I love it. I like it, so I just kind of do it because I don't know, I like it enough. I love my wife and kids. I love my family, right? So I spend time with them. I love the friends that I have. But the thing you spend 40 hours, 50 hours a week doing, and another 40 to 50 hours a week thinking and stressing about, it's okay to like it. Like, to me, that's an indication of you're in your zone of excellence. You're very competent. I love what you said. Work falls to the competent. Is that what you said?
Yep.
But genius is when you just love. And you can't even, like, I do this now. Like, there's things I do on a day-to-day basis that somebody might be like, well, how do you earn money for them? Like, I don't know. I don't know yet. I don't know. It'll come. Like, it's sort of, but I just know that this is where I'm meant to be. And this is what my genius is. I love this medium. It doesn't give me income in the hour that I'm doing it like a job does, but the payoff comes later, and it comes from a place of much more fulfillment. That's my take, at least. What do you think of that?
Well, it reminds me of something that Jesus said. Judas asked Jesus, what is the way? And Jesus said, by developing love and compassion. And what really strikes me about that is that Jesus taught about everything. And this is just viewing Jesus, whether you believe in Jesus as, from a holy perspective or a secular perspective, just as a wisdom teacher. He taught about everything. Yeah. And I love it when a sage declares a major. He says it's all about love and compassion. So love for others, love for yourself, love in the activity you're in. Love is incredibly expansive. And I love the fact that you're focusing on love. But I also want to just anchor on compassion for a bit. Compassion is an absolute superpower. And it's hard, but it's an absolute superpower. The other individual I think of that I really exalt as a wisdom teacher is the Buddha. I think Jesus and the Buddha, pretty much at the pinnacle. The Buddha also said, those with great compassion hold all of my teachings in the palm of their hand. Same thing. Buddha taught about everything. If you read the Dhammapada, it's the A to Z of life. He's focusing on compassion. What is it about compassion? When we're truly compassionate for someone else, it changes our energy. So when we feel someone's going through something really difficult, and we put ourselves in their shoes and we really feel what they're going through, that's empathy. That's great. Compassion's a little stronger. Compassion is, I feel that, and I'm going to use my powers to help. And when we help, we serve. When we serve, we feel better inside. So outward compassion as an orientation is something I really focus on. The tougher nut to crack is compassion inside. We have a strong negativity bias. You have it, I have it. Scientists say up to 80% of our thoughts a day are negative, 95% are repetitive. We're just in this stew. And the Buddhist monk Pema Chodron said, the greatest harm we do to ourselves is not looking at ourselves honestly and compassionately. Just being able to step back and say, what is my mind thinking right now? Here are all these things going through my mind. I got to do this. I got to do that. I need this. I need that. Oh my gosh. We have such an opportunity to just have compassion for ourselves. One of the things that I recommend when people are, we all go through difficulties in life where life feels really heavy. Being able to just sit down when those moments come and write down all the thoughts, all the feelings in your head. Great journaling exercise. I call it an agony list. Just write it all down. Don't invest in it. Don't follow that tributary down. Just look at it. And then step back and look at that list and say, oh my gosh, look at all these things I'm carrying. Oh, my poor ego, my poor mind carrying all of these things. Being able to develop compassion for yourself is absolutely critical, because particularly high achievers, we're always going to fall prey to that orientation of, I've got to achieve more. I've got to achieve more. It's going back to time. It's going back to the now that we talked about earlier. The ability to be able to be joyful and present in the now, partially that's releasing from this negative program that's constantly running, seeing the program, saying, I see you. And oh my gosh, mind, I feel so much compassion that you're having to hold that. Just that 1 degree of separation. We talk about working in the business versus on the business. It's the same thing with our minds.
Yeah.
They're in our mind and it's churning, etc. But when we step back and can say, what am I thinking now? It's a critical degree of separation for happiness. One of the great sage questions of all time, what am I thinking now? Zaps us into metacognition. Metadata is data about the data. Metacognition is thinking about thinking. So just this gentle, compassionate, what am I thinking now? That's also, by the way, I keep trying to answer your question. How do we know we're in the program? How do we know when we're being influenced by mimetic desire?
Mm-hmm.
When I say, man, I really want that Porsche, stepping back and saying, oh, I really want that Porsche. What's going on there? Why do I want that Porsche? Is that really going to bring me happiness? Not being in the mix, but being able to step back from it and get perspective. Absolutely critical.
I love that. Happiness Explorer is the new podcast. And what I love about this is it's not just, hey, let's jump on and talk like many podcasts like mine, right? Do a little research, learn about the person, then have a deep conversation. There's some prep in advance. Your guests are taking a survey that you've concocted, put together based on, like you said, multiple points of data, multiple years of research that you've done around the science of happiness. So, I took it. It was, I don't even know how many questions. It was a lot. It took like 10, 15 minutes to go through, but really interesting. And then the outputs for me were really interesting when I was on your show. And then you kind of go through and coach on it. What do you hope to do? What do you hope to change? What do you hope to share or give to the world through the Happiness Explorer podcast?
Being able to be with real people that have found sustained happiness and understand how they did it and bring the power of story forward, because it's sticky. It sticks with us. So a great example of what I get really excited. You mentioned you're really curious, and I'm really curious about happiness. So on the wisdom diagnostic, 50 questions statistically correlated with what happiness is. I'll ask someone a question on a 1 to 5 scale. It might be, how much do you love yourself? And someone says, I'm a 5. And I always ask the question, have you always been that way? And 90% of the time I hear, hell no. And I'm like, there it is. That's the story. What did this person that's just like you, just like me, do in their life that got them to sustain happiness? I am fascinated by that. Happiness Explorer is finding those leverage points where people have found sustained happiness, understanding how they did it, hearing their story in a way that's sticky for us that we can replicate too.
It's a great name. Available on all podcast platforms, along with being the second podcast on the Gobundance Media platform on YouTube. So just go to Gobundance Media on YouTube and you'll find not only this podcast, Tribe of Millionaires, but also Mike Duffy and the Happiness Explorer. Mike, man, I appreciate you doing this. Thanks for taking the time, and we could go another hour. There's a lot here, and I want to thank you as well. You talk about authentic relationships, like, and you know the story on this, but you gave me the best accountability around my own, I don't know, fast moving behavior, maybe isolating people or not being responsive and all of that. And so I really, really, truly, and I wanted to say it publicly, appreciate you taking the time and sharing that, showing the love to me, to say, hey, something you got to work on, something I need you to work on, is this. And I've taken it to heart. And honestly, I've become much better at it. Not perfect, but much better at my responsiveness. Like, I'm always moving a mile a minute. I feel like, sometimes motion is better than progress for some reason. Not that I think that, but like my behavior indicates that. There's moments with GoBundance, man. There's you. I think of my buddy, Chad Beeman. Chad Beeman, as a quick aside, pulled me aside at an event 6 months after I moved to the Dominican and said, hey, I need to talk to you. I said, sure. What's up? He goes, are you present? I'm like, what? He's like, are you being present? And I was like, no. Why do you ask? He goes, he did Hawaii for 6 years with his family. And he's like, man, the one thing I look back on in that time was I worked my ass off because I wanted to make sure that this adventure didn't go south. So I wasn't present. And I was like, man, that's exactly what I'm doing. So when you asked the question of me, or when you gave me the feedback around, hey, man, I'm noticing this behavior, something for you to be aware of, it stopped me in my tracks and it allowed me to shift. So to your point about, real accountability, real discussion, being honest with people, open and honest with people, you demonstrate it. And I truly appreciate that. So thanks for all you do. And I hope everybody tunes into the Happiness Explorer, man. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie.